Oscar-winning U.S. actor Gene Hackman and his wife have been found dead at their home in New Mexico. He was 95. Police said the cause of his death has not been confirmed. An $80 million fortune built on decades of Hollywood grit fell into a legal trap in just 7 days. For 20 years, Gene Hackman's will stood like a fortress, carefully written to keep his money away from his estranged children. But a sudden twist of fate in early 2025 flipped the script completely. His final wishes collapsed, leaving his life's work completely exposed to the one family irony he spent a lifetime trying to avoid. Would you forgive your wealthy father after learning he did not even leave you a single cent? The omission inside the 2005 will. In 2005, Gene Hackman sat down with his legal team to draft a new last will and testament. He was 75 years old at the time, long past the days of chasing Hollywood blockbusters, and deeply settled into a private life in New Mexico with his second wife, Betsy Arakoa. He knew the immense value of what he had built. He had real estate, film residuals, investments, and cash accumulated from a career defined by absolute excellence. Music. But more than just protecting his wealth, Hackman used this document to draw a definitive line in the sand regarding his family. When the paperwork was finalized, it contained a structural choice that would shock the public years later, though it made perfect sense to those inside his immediate circle. The will explicitly named his 3 adult children from his first marriage, Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie. In the cold, precise language of estate law, identifying your children by name is a crucial step. It proves to a probate judge that you are of sound mind, that you know exactly who your immediate family members are, and that you haven't simply forgotten they exist. But right after listing their names, the document took a sharp, intentional turn. It stated that the entirety of his estate, without exception, was to be left to his wife, Betsy. Music. His children were given no inheritance, no assets, and no contingency payouts. They were acknowledged, but they were entirely omitted from the wealth. To the outside world, cutting off your children looks like an act of sudden rage. But the reality of the Hackman family dynamic was far more complicated, stretched across decades of slow, quiet drift. Gene had married his first wife, Faye Maltese, in 1956, long before he was a household name. Together, they traveled the hard, broke road of an aspiring actor's life, moving from New York to California, scraping by while Gene fought for a break. By the time his career finally exploded in the late 60s and early 70s, the immense pressure of his newfound stardom began to fracture the household. Hackman was a notoriously intense actor, a man who threw his entire psychological weight into characters like Popeye Doyle. That level of artistic obsession took a heavy toll on his physical presence at home. He was often away on distant film sets for months at a time, and when he was home, the emotional residue of his gritty roles lingered. By the time he and Faye divorced in 1986, after 3 decades together, the damage to his relationship with his children was already deeply rooted. Music. As Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie grew into adults, the gap between father and children only widened. When Gene married Betsy Arakoa in 1991, a woman roughly 3 decades his junior, the family alignment shifted permanently. Hackman retreated into the high desert of Santa Fe, effectively closing the door on his old Hollywood life and, to a large extent, his first family. The 2005 will was not a rushed emotional reaction. It was a reflection of a 20-year estrangement that had hardened into a permanent status quo. Music. He had built a new life with Betsy. She had become his anchor and, in his mind, she was the only one who deserved to inherit the fruits of his labor. Legal experts who have since reviewed the strategy behind the 2005 document note that it was built like a fortress for the time it was written. Hackman's lawyers used standard aggressive language to ensure that if any of his children attempted to contest the will after his passing, they would face an uphill battle against a clearly stated intent. Music. The document made it undeniably clear that Betsy was the sole gatekeeper of the Hackman legacy. For 20 years this paper sat in a vault, an unshakable barrier ensuring that the actor's final wishes would be executed exactly as he intended, keeping his fortune firmly within the boundary lines he had chosen. But the flaw in even the strongest fortress is that it can only protect you from the dangers you expect. Hackman and his legal team wrote a document that perfectly accounted for his past family grievances, But they completely failed to anticipate how a brutal timeline of just 7 days in the future could turn their legal masterpiece into a useless piece of paper. Every legal document is built on an assumption. But what happens when fate refuses to follow the script? The chronology of failure. When Gene Hackman finalized his will in 2005, he and his legal team made a massive gamble on a single variable: life expectancy. His wife, Betsy Arakawa, was roughly 30 years younger than him. From a purely statistical standpoint, the setup seemed flawless. Hackman was already in his mid-70s, and it was widely expected that he would pass away first, leaving Betsy to inherit the $80 million empire securely. Because the future seemed so mathematically certain, Hackman's will did not include a contingent beneficiary, a standard backup choice that specifies who gets the money if the primary heir dies first. Snorts. The document was a straight line with no detour, completely lacking a plan B. That total reliance on a single outcome proved to be a fatal flaw in early 2025. In a staggering twist of timing, the script flipped in the most tragic way possible. Betsy contracted hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a rare and aggressive virus, and passed away suddenly at the age of 65. Hackman, who was 95 and suffering from advanced Alzheimer's disease, was left entirely alone in their isolated Santa Fe compound. Due to his severe cognitive decline, investigators believe the legendary actor did not fully comprehend that his wife had died. He lived silently alongside her tragic passing for 6 agonizing days before his own body succumbed to natural heart failure. Because of those 6 days, a devastating legal sequence was set into motion.